and we appreciate Mr. Fred Jordan joining us via phone. We may not see his face for a minute, but he is with us. We can hear him. I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. I'm really excited to be a part of this presentation today for the African Trade Network. Thank you, Franklin, for inviting me to be a part of it. And then I'm very humbled that all of you are able to join us for this event. We are really, really fortunate to have Mr. Fred Jordan, who is an engineer, he's an entrepreneur, and he's the founder of California Business Council for Equal Opportunity. Fred, we really, really appreciate you joining us. He's a civil engineer, businessman, an activist, a veteran. Mr. Jordan, thank you so much for your service. And he is an author. He also serves on various boards and business networks like the National Black Chamber of Commerce. Jordan received his bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Harvard University after serving in the Vietnam War, and then attended Northeastern University in Boston, where he earned his master's degree. During his first year at Northeastern, Bechtel Corporation, a global engineering company, approached him with a job offer in California. So, Mr. Jordan, I want to start at Bechtel, because when you talk about government contracts, is this not the absolute blueprint for utilizing government contracts and grants? Had you heard of this company when they approached you about coming to work for them?
I had basically heard of them because Bechtel was the largest engineering constructor in the world and was headquartered in San Francisco. And of course, you know, these companies are very savvy. We had a big storm in Boston, and of course, that's when they show up and say, oh, it's 72 degrees in San Francisco. And, and it was 3 degrees in Boston, and the snow was still on my shoulder. And I said, oh, geez, okay, let's talk. So, no, I had not very much, because I worked for a firm that was an engineering firm, and it was the number one engineering firm in the country called Charles T. Main out of Boston at the time anyway. And so I had heard of them. I was in school on the co-op. Incidentally, I didn't go to Harvard University. I went to Howard.
Howard. I'm sorry. Did I say Harvard?
University.
Howard. Please forgive me.
And then I got my master's degree from Stanford. But I was on the graduate co-op program at Northeastern University, as such. And so anyway, Bechtel got me to San Francisco, and that's where I am now.
So can you talk a bit, Fred, about, you said they were very savvy. This company, Bechtel, that has been a part of all of our lives and been a part of lives across the globe, but most people haven't heard of this company, and the savviness that you're going to be talking about today in helping to inform people about getting involved with government grants and contracts. Talk about, when you say the word savvy as it relates to Bechtel, how is it that savviness can transfer to the people who are listening, who are saying, I want to be savvy too? Because this company has been around since, I think, 1919, and they are massive in the wealth that they've accumulated and the kind of growth that they've experienced over the years.
You're perfectly correct. The company is a massive company. It is one of the most outstanding companies in the world, and it is privately owned. And it's one of the largest companies in the United States that's privately owned. Steve Bechtel was the guy, Steve Bechtel Sr. He started off on the Continental Railroad, building the railroads across the country back in the late 1800s. So it has something like 1890 or somewhere in there. But the company is a multidiscipline company. It does engineering and construction. Probably most of its work is foreign. In Africa, in the Middle East, particularly in the Middle East, Saudi Arabia and some of those Middle Eastern countries that have a lot of money, Bechtel has loomed as probably number one in the world. And so I learned a lot. They brought me out because I was a structural engineer and working in power. And so they were doing the prototype nuclear plant, which is up in Michigan. And they were designing that, and they, of course, needed structural engineers to work on that prototype. And as you recall, Japan had that big tsunami that wiped out its nuclear plants, and Bechtel probably would not have done that. I would have been aware of the dangers of being close to the ocean and being subjected to a tsunami. And of course, those are all the things to consider when you're in design. But speaking of Bechtel, they're up there, and I was fortunate to be able to work for such an amazing company.
So everybody who's watching and listening, and if you don't know about Bechtel, I invite you to go and do a little research on them, because as Mr. Jordan has pointed out, they are very savvy. It is still a family-owned, multi-billion-dollar company, and started in 1919, I believe. So Mr. Jordan, you said you learned a lot from them. How is it watching a company like Bechtel? How can that transfer to women and minority-owned companies doing some of the things that Bechtel actually did?
Mm-hmm. Well, the first thing that I do, and that is if I'm associated or in with a very successful company, I watch them. In fact, my first brochure in my company, which at the time I think was Jordan Matheson Associates, we almost copied the brochure of Bechtel. We just changed the name and put our own projects in it. And so I watch the company. I watch it, how they treat their people, and how they promote people, and of course the technical aspects of it. You're working with senior engineers who know what they're doing, but it's a grand opportunity to learn from a successful company. And that's I always feel like the stock market, if you want to be bullish, like in the stock market, you need to hang with the bulls. And so I've always sought out very successful companies and people to hang around during my lifetime to and watch them and learn from them. And that's what I did with Bechtel, where I moved forward. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Mr. Jordan, there is a quote that said about artists in particular, that good artists study great artists, and great artists copy. So that's just what you just said, do. It's not like I got to go reinvent anything. I just see the great ones and I copy. I think sometimes we do get stuck because we're sitting in a corner trying to come up with a great idea or a great way to do something. And there are some people who are already doing it great and just copy.
That's correct. I think.
Let me just ask you this: what do you think was the greatest? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, you don't copy verbatim, because then they'll sue you for using their material.
No. Right. But I'm saying the way you do things, just the pattern that they've set in doing things.
Exactly.
That's what I meant.
And
I wasn't encouraging anybody to plagiarize. Don't think that, but to see how great companies have operated. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mr. Fred, you have done a number of things. As you mentioned before, you started an engineering firm and you worked in a number of projects, and predominantly African American communities in some places that other companies were a little concerned about going. Why is it, and what did you put together that made you successful in being awarded those particular contracts?
Well, at the time, and that's an excellent question, and I think anyone going into business has to find his or her niche, and you find out. I mean, this is America is the most competitive society in the world, so you just can't step out, and in fact, in any place, whether it's Africa, the Caribbean, Europe, or whatever, there is some competition out there. And so when I started out, redevelopment was prominent, and black churches were part of that because the neighborhood of African American was low, and so the black churches gave us some of our first opportunities. And you spoke of places where other companies could not go, specifically white companies, because we were the first black company on the West Coast. Yes, we were in Chicago. I had an office in Chicago at one time, but what white company could go down the south side of Chicago? You know, they would be stopped at 22nd and Dearborn, and whereas we could go through. So we were fortunate to be able to design the streets that Muhammad Ali and Jesse Jackson, and it's called the Greenwood Streets, lived on. And finally, President Obama actually moved on that street, but they wouldn't let any white companies down there. So we were down there. The white companies did get jealous of us, and of all people in the world that helped us out, that helped to save our company, was the very famous Mafia gentleman who did some prison time out here, but he got away. But anyway, his name will come to me, but he's the most famous Mafia guy. But anyway,
Al Capone?
They helped me. Al Capone. Al Capone didn't do it. It was his family. I can't say Al Capone did it, but there was a Capone that showed up, was sent over by another company because I came from Boston, and since we were one of the first African American firms, Charles C. Maine, the company in Boston, watched me continually, or watched my office, not me personally, but watched my office, and they made a connection with one of the Capones who was an electrical engineer. And he came in, and he was excellent. But all of a sudden, the city held up payments and everything else stopped. I didn't know what was going on, but because in my office, we're not allowed to ask, age and where you come from and all of that stuff. And I didn't even realize that it was a Capone in the office. And when I was recognized that, it was like cold water went down my back. But the gentleman was great, and we survived. But there were a lot of places like you can't go down to Watts. And white companies in the old days couldn't go into Watts, the Central District of Seattle. So that helped. The lack of integration. Where our people were together, then there were opportunities. But then you get your basis, and then you come out and compete with everybody else. And so we've had the opportunity to compete with some of the great engineering companies in the country. In fact, not a whole lot, but at least work with them, and even joint venture with them. So it's a matter, and of course, as you go along, you see what other people are doing that are successful, and you put that in your agenda and in your program.
Okay, that's a better way to put it, Mr. Jordan. Put it in your agenda. I said copy. So see what they're doing and put it in your agenda. Listen, let me just ask you this. And again, thank you all so much for joining us for this very insightful conversation with this man who has a vast list of credits to his career, and still doing great works in the community and across the globe. What I ask about is the challenges that small and minority businesses have in having the right insurance or the credentials to bid on government contracts as subs or primes, because that keeps a lot of people out of the game.
Well, we should never fool ourselves. Discrimination is alive. I've been here and done that. It is alive. And one needs to be aware of that and to, maybe be a subcontractor. But even if you're a contractor, the bonding people are going to give you a hard time. Your insurance people, your financial people, you're going to get a hard time. And so you have to get into situations where you can get protection. And one way to get protected is to become a disadvantaged business enterprise, DBE. And don't be ashamed of that. Because if you're a DBE in the federal system, you're DBE on any federal contracting. You have to, the Small Business Administration or the Department of Transportation, wherever you're trying to go, they will register you. It may take some paperwork and may take a month or two, but become a DBE, and then that's where the projects go out, and someone will say, you must use a DBE, meaning that you're an African American, Asian, Latino, a woman. And so that's where you can get your protection. And then at certain times you might want to be a prime, to be the number one business to do the job once you know how to do it and people feel comfortable. But it's very important to register. And a lot of people say register as a small business, particularly here in California. But there's other small business ethnic groups, they become your competitors. So, I would say stick with the Black Chambers, join the Black Chambers, and the National Black Chamber associates with about eight other chambers in Africa and the Caribbean, in Ghana and whatever, Senegal, not Senegal, but in different, South Africa, Kenya, and I've taken trade missions to these particular countries, and their opportunities have been found. But you have to seek protection. And then, like I said, you have to do business a little bit different. You just can't go out and do this because the selections and the system is not set up for African Americans. I can tell you that. It is not set up. So you have to find your own way and use whatever assistance you can get from the Small Business Administration, from the Minority Business Development Agency, and from your state agencies that will assist minority business, because that's why it's here, because it is recognized, that Black business, African American businesses, minority businesses have a hard time in this system, and that's the way it is in the United States of America. And but you don't get that discrimination in other places like Africa and Caribbean. If you decide to do business foreign, believe it or not, the African countries have open arms to American companies doing business. And of course, any African companies that want to come to America, you can come in, register, and you become a minority and do business in the United States. Everybody else does come in from everywhere in the world. So,
isn't it amazing that everybody is more welcome than the ones who help to build a country? the African American that helped to build the country. And kudos to Franklin Marshall for starting the African Trade Network, and as you mentioned about the Chamber of Commerce, the African American Chamber of Commerce, and the opportunity to be a part of events like this, where there's frank and open conversation, no pun intended, but open conversation about the challenges, then so that you can talk to other people. How did you navigate it? How do small businesses come together so that I may not be able to afford the bonding by myself, but if I do a joint venture with another African American company that's doing the same kind of work and we get bonded under the same umbrella? Talk about that, Mr. Jordan, and why that kind of synergy helps companies that are trying to take advantage of the contracts that are available when bonding can be an issue.
Well, you're perfectly right. You can joint venture with other companies. We did the first wastewater treatment plant with two other minority firms, one black, one Asian. We've sought out, some of our fellow businesses. That's one way to do it. And of course, you can be a subcontractor, and many times it's so much of this is political to go in on these government contractors. I know that when Senator Boxer from California was the senator, that she always provided assistance. There are certain politicians who are helpful. Congresswoman Barbara Lee out of California here is always on. She just called me the other day to say that there's a new bill coming out called CHIPS. It has to do with manufacturing and whatever's under the Department of Commerce. And she said that the Secretary of Commerce is a woman from Maine or someplace, but she's on it. And that we need to organize that because it passed the House of Representatives, and it needs to have minority business participation, in particular African Americans. So we haven't really had very much help in the manufacturing sector and in that area. We've had a lot of help on the construction side, but this is it's a heads up. We're fortunate in this country to have the congressional people to be very, very cognizant of the lack of opportunity for African Americans. I'm talking about the Black Caucus of congressional people. They're really, every last one of them right on it. It was a little, we do have a black senator from South Carolina, I guess. It's a little disappointing to me, but I had spoken to him before and I thought he was on it, but then he, so everybody is not in there, but I can tell you, the majority of our Black Caucus are there to assist. And if you go to them with your problem, they can pick up that phone, make a phone call, and make things happen. So,
Mr. Jordan, as you're talking about the political arena, do you think small business owners underestimate the value of those relationships with elected officials? When it's time for elections and you see those signs and billboards that are up, those signs and billboards are up because people have contributed to these campaigns. And if you've contributed, you have a greater chance of the phone call being answered when you call. So do you think people underestimate the role that they need to be playing in who gets elected in their community? You spoke of the Black Caucus. Every state in the country has a Black Caucus of state legislators. And then there's the National Black Caucus that meets. Are you present at any of those meetings? Are you present at your city council or county commission meetings? We want to get government contracts, but we don't get involved with government. Do you, the people who are making those decisions, do you think small business owners underestimate the significance of those relationships?
Excellent points. I mean, you made some excellent points there. And of course, I deal mostly with African American businesses and minority businesses. And I think that they do underestimate. You know, in this country, you have to pay to play.
Yeah.
And pay meaning that you need to go out and support your politicians. Like you say, when you're a contributor, they will answer the phone, you know, because they have to be reelected. And so we have to, I think we underestimate that. We're not that cognizant. You know, I've got maybe 5 envelopes sitting up here on my desk right now that I need to make a check out to. You know, I mean, we have a black senator from Georgia who is seeking help. We have Stacey Abrams, who is, I mean, in other words, these people are vetted. They are vetted by other Black Caucus members to say, and when I get a message, you know, to say, hey, we need to support this person because this person can make things happen, you know. And so the Black Caucus, about 40-some people here in this country, they can stop a bill. They may not make a bill, but it's enough of them to veto a bill. So, you know, so they demand attention, and so we you know, I always say business. I mean, politics is business, and business is politics. And if you don't have the right kind of local participation in whatever, you know, politicians in your corner, then your chances of being successful is not all that good. And I can tell you, for instance, the richest Black African American man, or the richest African American in this country, Smith, has a asset management firm. But I can tell you, and his office is down the street from mine, I can tell you his success was greatly enhanced by some of our congressional people, like out of Los Angeles, and of course Willie Brown. I've been in meetings where Willie Brown said, "You will." Willie Brown is the former Speaker of the Assembly in California and a former mayor of San Francisco. But when he was Speaker of the Assembly, you know, we would be in a meeting of one of the retirement funds, and he would come into the meeting and he says, "You will give some work to these African American and minority companies here," and that happened because the Speaker of the Assembly said so. And so that's why we have to work together with our politicians. And I try to stay very close to you know, even though my contributions may not be big time, but at least I feel I'm supporting them, and I think they will support Black business.
So these relationships are critical, and Mr. Jordan, thank you very much for being transparent about this, because I think sometimes people feel like they don't have to do this. Well, you don't have to, but if you plan to succeed in this arena, you got to play ball the way they play ball. You can't show up to play football in a basketball uniform, because that's not quite going to work. So thank you for being transparent about this, because looking for government contracts and getting government contracts, you can fill out all the paperwork, but those relationships can help push the paperwork forward. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Mr. Jordan, thank you so much again. And these relationships with organizations like the African Trade Network, like the San Francisco African American Chamber of Commerce, are critical, and she can share it with others. Everybody, I really thank you all for your attentiveness. I felt the energy and your attentiveness as you were listening. This is an opportunity that we can win. We can win it together, as opposed to trying to do it singularly And winning together means connecting with organizations like the African Trade Network, Mr. Jordan's organization, so that synergy can be formed and the unity to be able to move forward together, so that the economic picture, not just changing for today, but for future generations. Franklin, thank you very much for allowing me to be a part of today's event. A great event today. Thank you so much. And thank you to all who joined and who are watching. Back to you, Franklin.
Thank you so much, Pam, and Mr. Jordan. You guys did an excellent job, and I've learned a tremendous amount. I'm now going to start paying politicians. That's going to be a specialty of mine. And it's fantastic to have someone with that type of wisdom to come on and share with us. And we've heard it many times that you have to pay to play, and then copying. Sometimes we're always doing things and we want to be unique, and copying. That really stood out to me, of copying. And I'm going to do that too. I'm going to copy more. And I'm so happy that we had such a great audience and such a great message to take us away and help us to be successful in business. So on that note, we are going to conclude. And again, thank you for coming and sharing and being with us on this meeting today with the African Trade Network. We have a meeting on Monday coming up. Every Monday we meet at 10 o'clock, and we welcome you to come to that meeting. And it's extremely exhilarating, and you will get a lot out of it. So blessings upon you today. And again, thank you for coming. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Yes.
Thank you.